What's happening between the American administration and Israel? The United States has a headquarters now in Israel to dictate what Israel does and doesn't do in relation to Gaza, alongside several other countries. But it doesn't stop with dictating what Israel is doing in Gaza, but also now they're threatening Israel from jeopardizing the Gaza ceasefire. U.S. official says if Netanyahu F's up the deal, Donald Trump will F him. Listen to this, okay? Donald Trump, according to a U.S. official, this was reported on the Israeli Channel 12, said that Netanyahu is walking a fine line with President Trump. If he keeps going, he'll F up the Gaza deal, and if he F's up the Gaza deal, Donald Trump will F him. According to a U.S. official published in Israeli media, confirmed by several other reports as well. Now, this wouldn't be the first time that Donald Trump swears at Netanyahu. He did so when he accepted the presidency of Joe Biden initially. Things went downhill between him and Donald Trump. Donald Trump, of course, started to have a relationship. He gave Netanyahu almost everything that he wanted and needed. But it reached a stage where something started to clearly happen, and we're seeing elements of that. By the way, this is no strategic disaster between the United States and Israel as far as these developments are. We're not talking about the United States and Israel all of a sudden breaking ties. Nothing of the sort. But we are talking about two sides that are not necessarily seeing the exact same thing or wanting the exact same thing, and are coming at loggerheads in relation to the continuation of this genocide in Gaza. In my previous video, I spoke about Donald Trump understanding what Benjamin Netanyahu's weak point is, which is the court case against him in Israel, and he pushed for Benjamin Netanyahu being granted amnesty in Israel, or a plea deal, even something of the sort. Rumors are Netanyahu and Israel would have some blackmailing information and evidence against Donald Trump. But now we have a counterbalance, a strategic counterbalance between the interests of Netanyahu himself, who wouldn't be able to get away with the trial in Israel unless it was for the participation of Donald Trump. He's the only one speaking about this. Netanyahu is a wanted war criminal. He is wanted for crimes against humanity. He's also in Israel a criminal at the end of the day. And Donald Trump is handing him the rescue rope. And now, according to these reports, things are escalating between the two, at least visibly and at least from what we can see. Now, in this report, they're talking about this threat that came from this U.S. official. If Netanyahu breaks the deal or F's up the deal, Trump will F him up. They weren't just talking about that. They were talking about the United States criticizing the move in the Israeli Knesset to vote on annexing the West Bank. Two bills. That wouldn't necessarily pass, by the way, because there would be another stage to that. But the United States didn't take that in a very good manner, especially with the sensitive period, with J.D. Vance being there. And as a matter of fact, J.D. Vance himself, he was asked about it in an interview, and he did not hold back. Let's hear what J.D. Vance had to say.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll do, yeah.
The West Bank vote yesterday that took place while you were in the country.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was sort of confused by that. Now, I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the annexation of the West Bank, by the way, if you haven't been monitoring the statements of the Israeli coalition members since the beginning, it's quite a sensitive issue, and for various reasons. There was a notion in the Israeli coalition, especially from people like Smotrich, that they're gonna annex the West Bank with the confirmation of Trump, seeing as Trump previously, in his first term, he legitimized Israel's occupation of the Golan Heights, and he also moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. They thought that Trump is going to give them everything that they wanted, and they started to milk everything. And whenever Trump started to shift or ask for something else or view something differently, the right-wing media in Israel would go all out and start to say that Trump is all of a sudden Hamas, and portray images of Trump with like a bandana and what have you, or this kufi. Okay, they were hoping to have an easy annexation of the West Bank, but J.D. Vance in that statement, he was very clear. He didn't hold back. Told them, no, the policy of Trump is no annexation for the West Bank. Why is that? It's because what they have spoken about with the majority of the mediators, the Arab and Muslim mediators, was the establishment of a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders after the ceasefire continues. Especially if they wanted to, what they call, disarm Hamas, who said that there will be no disarming unless we have a state. And then again, without saying, will they recognize or won't they recognize Israel, truce, no truce, all of these details, we don't know much about them because a lot of the details are still hidden. And the mediators in joint statements said clearly that what they agreed upon with Trump is to have these steps to create a vision to have a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders. As problematic as it is, that solution, because the ideal solution is really a one state between the Jordan River to the sea with equal rights for everyone, but they're pushing for it. And Hamas told them, we can take it and hand our arms to the Palestinian state so long as we have an army. This is something that Netanyahu, of course, is not buying. The Israeli Knesset also approved or voted on multiple motions to not accept, not agree to have a Palestinian state. This is something also very serious. So we're dealing with a side that doesn't want a Palestinian state, and as a matter of fact, wanted to continue the genocide. In the initial report where the US official said that Trump will F Netanyahu up if he messes the deal in Gaza, he said that Netanyahu wanted to keep going, and he was testing the boundaries with Donald Trump. And that's something, by the way, that both Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff said in their recent interview too. They said that Netanyahu and Israel were taking it too far, and that Trump understands what's in the best interest of the long-term interests of Israel, and therefore he had to make these moves. Now, what is Donald Trump planning here, and is Israel going to back down even with phases 2 and 3? Let's clarify everything here. The United States and Israel are in a strategic relationship. However, it must be made very clear that even in strategic relationships, you can have differences, and you can have severe differences. As a matter of fact, it was evident that many of the countries that Israel is allied with, traditional allies, including the countries that helped establish Israel, like Britain, they had sour moments that led to serious escalations, at least at a diplomatic level, if not on any other levels too, although there were confirmations that other levels were escalating as well. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has his own calculations. The United States has its own calculations. There are coatings of the US support for Israel, whether they are the religious coatings, whether they are the messianic coatings, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, the United States empire looks at things from the lens of the US interests. What is the interest? Is Israel still an interest, or is Israel becoming a burden? Israel was given 2 years to eliminate one Palestinian resistance organization, and they failed, and they lost to that organization and to the Palestinian people. Donald Trump, from his perspective and from American perspective and from the Western establishment perspective, this is a pathetic state. You landed 200 tons, 200 or 200,000 tons of TNT on Gaza, the equivalent of 8 nuclear bombs on Gaza, if not more, and you haven't been able to eliminate Hamas of people who have basic weapons who are fighting against you. What are we going to do to you? They didn't fight on their behalf, the Americans. They helped them with whatever they wanted, but the Israelis failed. And at the end of the day, strategic relationship or not a strategic relationship, we're seeing what Donald Trump is doing inside of America, let alone with Israel. Donald Trump has internal feuds in the United States that can eclipse his differences with Netanyahu, by the way. So we're talking about a situation where there are visibly some differences, and Donald Trump also likes to be in the camp that is constantly moving and winning, whereas Benjamin Netanyahu was just trying to delay this deal so that he can save himself from the Israeli justice system, if you can call it a justice system, or justice for the Jews or the Zionists, whatever it is. So what happened there is that Trump clearly understood the point or the reason that Benjamin Netanyahu is delaying this. Therefore, he started to focus on this point. Hence why we're hearing these statements from him now and from J.D. Vance. And not only that, now Donald Trump is also saying that I'm going to decide whether Marwan al-Barghouthi should be freed, and I will visit Gaza soon. Trump portrayed Netanyahu as the main roadblock to ceasefire, saying in Time magazine interview, he would have gone on for years. He had a recent interview during which he stated that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was the main obstacle in this, and that he will be making a decision whether or not to release Marwan al-Barghouthi. Let's also elaborate on that. Marwan al-Barghouthi isn't the most dangerous Palestinian abductee in the Israeli dungeons, but he is one of the most symbolic ones. And what I mean by symbolic, you have a person who is ex-Fatah, which belongs to the West Bank PLO. He created a splinter group that was in an opposition to the authority of Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the West Bank. He had a lot of popularity, and he is a figure that is welcomed by both sides, from the Palestinian resistance, and also many in the PLO would also agree with him. Israel didn't want to release him because they did not want to give Hamas that credit for releasing a national figure in the form of Marwan al-Barghouthi. But according to Trump in that interview, he's viewing al-Barghouthi as a man who can bring both sides together and actually lead a new Palestinian state. The Israeli Minister of National Security was viewed the other day abusing Marwan al-Barghouthi. Marwan al-Barghouthi was beaten and tortured recently and not getting medical treatment. Israel's trying to kill him in prison just in case there's any chance of him being released. However, Donald Trump saying that indicates several things. Number one, he's doing something that Israel doesn't want and considers a red line. The American president is doing that. Say what you like about them, both of them, think whatever you want to think about Donald Trump. I probably think the same thing as you do. But he is crossing an Israeli red line. That's what's happening now between him and Netanyahu. The Israeli system said these people are red lines. Barghouthi and Abdullah al-Barghouthi too, and Ahmad Saadat, a couple of other figures too. Did he have a deal with the mediators and the Palestinian side to push for his release, even if the Palestinians agree on not going ahead until the last second to get him released, because they know Israel will not be accepting that and they wouldn't want to destroy the whole ceasefire agreement? Perhaps that could be an option, because in that world, everything is possible. behind the curtains and behind closed doors and in rooms, all of these things. Who thought that his envoy, Steve Witkoff, with Jared Kushner, would go and meet with the leader of Hamas, Khalil al-Hayya? And he was telling him, I'm sorry for your loss, you know, when he had this, when there was the Israeli attack in Qatar. That is showing that there's a progress that's happening here, or a translation of certain elements within that agreement that Donald Trump had with the mediators before, that we are seeing now. They're slowly getting out, and more will probably be coming out in the future. And whether we want to view this as something positive or negative is dependent on how we are viewing the ceasefire that's happening in Gaza. The fact of the matter is there is a significant de-escalation in what's happening in Gaza. Israel does still have breaches, but things aren't going the way Benjamin Netanyahu wanted them to go. Benjamin Netanyahu did not want to stop the war. He wanted to continue the genocide against the Palestinian people. He had different plans with the Palestinian people. They wanted to ethnically cleanse them. They wanted to resettle in Gaza and establish squatting bases over there. And they wanted to take full control. None of that is happening. And we're talking about political elements here. If we want to talk about it from a military perspective, imagine an army declaring that its mission is to go and eliminate the movement or their enemy in Gaza, which is Hamas, going there for 2 years, not being able to, occupying certain territories, invasion, this and that, and then all of a sudden withdrawing to give their enemy time to breathe, time to rearm, time to recover, and time to eliminate their own collaborators from within. What sense does that make? And yes, Netanyahu did have a ceasefire and he went back to fighting later on, but his problems were tenfold when he came back, because he removed all of what they called the accomplishments of certain territories being occupied in Gaza, only for the sake of this temporary deal. And everyone lost faith and hope in them being able to do anything against the Palestinian resistance. And before this ceasefire took effect, it was humiliating for Israel. The scenes that were coming out of Gaza were humiliating for Israel. They were running away from people with AK-47s. They weren't confronting anyone. The Palestinian resistance was obliterating them left, right, and center. That's if we want to talk about it from a military front. So what we need to realize here is that not only that we have a military failure here, we are seeing a huge political failure for Israel too. And Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the fact that he was hoping to achieve in diplomacy or in politics what he hasn't been able to achieve in the battlefield against the Palestinian resistance, it's becoming clearer and clearer that the man was humiliated politically, just as he was humiliated militarily by the Palestinian resistance.